What's up, YouTube? It's the Action Figure Grader coming back to you with a first 12 figure focus on the Death Sqad Commander or the Star Destroyer Commander, depending on which card back it was released on. And I've got a number of examples here, everything from loose figures that are incomplete to complete loose figures, loose graded, mint on cards, both graded and ungraded, as well as some information on some of the foreign variants that are out there. He's an interesting character. He's got kind of a weird head, but so do I. And I've always liked the character. I've only got one loose graded example in my collection so far, but I do have a 31 back Empire Strikes Back card back that is in really gorgeous condition. That's at Collector Archive Services being graded right now. And I look forward to getting that one back so we can take a closer look at it. But in the interim, I thought I'd give you some price as well as COO marking information, just all the information you need that if you decide to pick up a few of these or one of these, I've got some information on the different variants that are out there, and I think it will be helpful. So let's go ahead and dig right in. The first one, I just wanted to start off with a simple Hong Kong Star Destroyer Commander, incomplete. And this one is in pretty good shape. The big thing you've got to keep in mind with the Star Destroyer Commander is the silver paint apps. The silver paint applications rub off really easily, especially on the wrist, as well as on the belt. There's a lot of silver there. And that button on the front of his belt often is worn out. So make sure to zoom in really closely on any photos to take a look at the condition of that. The other thing is the emblem. There's a number of different emblem variations that we'll go over later in this video. But this one was a nice clean example, probably like 80 plus condition. And keep in mind that it was incomplete without the black Imperial blaster that he's known to come with. But just like, as I said, all of these little squares on the utility belt that have the silver paint applications, those often do get a lot of wear. You also need to be careful for paint overspray, factory overspray of the paint. And as you can see, this example has got a good case of that. If you look at his gloves, both the left and the right arm, you can see where the gray that was used to paint the body and the arms oversprayed onto the black glossiness on the gloves. So just little minor things like that. You can also see on the boots with this figure right here, it's got some paint overspray or splotching. But this is the standard Hong Kong variation, and I'll show you some of the different date stamps and countries of origin here shortly. And for those of you who are kind of new to vintage Star Wars figures and variants, when I say COO, that just means country of origin, where the figure was manufactured. In this case, it was manufactured in Hong Kong, as most of them are. This one sold for 20 bucks plus another $10 shipping, and that's about the going rate for a near mint example, minus the weapon. If you're looking for one complete with the weapon, you're going to spend a little bit more, maybe about an extra 10 bucks or so. This one was not in as nearly a good condition. You can see that the paint on the belt is not nearly as nice, but it did include the weapon. It did include the weapon. So the other thing you got to keep in mind that this one suffers from is that the torso can often discolor, and it gets kind of a very faint yellowish tint to the torso, and that's the case with this one. It's harder to notice when I'm zoomed in like that, but if you look from far away with some of these photos, you can see that this has got very, very faint torso discoloration. And obviously the silver paint on this one is rubbed off a lot. So this is not a great example. I'd say this is probably more like a 75, maybe 70 condition. But that one still sold for $30 plus another $4 shipping. I think that if you're talking about a near mint example, you're probably closer to that $40, $45 range for a near mint complete example. It could be higher. It could be higher. It just depends on the demand and things like that. But, you know, it's a first 12 figure. I think this photo does a good job of catching or showing the torso discoloration. You can see how the back has got a little bit of yellowish brown going on. This one again also suffers from paint overspray in the opposite direction. It's got a lot of black there that has worn off on the back of his arm there. So, but that's a pretty typical 70, 75-ish condition figure, and that one again sold for about $33. Here's another example. Again, very, very slight torso discoloration, not nearly as bad as the last example. The silver paint's maybe in a little bit better condition, but he does have some wear around the hands, which you got to be careful of. It does have the Imperial blaster to go with him. The eyebrows are another area where you can sometimes see some discoloration. It's not nearly as bad on the eyebrows with the Star Destroyer Commander as, say, with Leia, because that black helmet kind of overshoots his face, which tends to protect the eyebrows a little bit, but that is another defect that you got to be on the lookout for. This one sold for 31 US dollars or $40 Canadian plus shipping. Now I wanted to dig into some loose graded figures. The first one, this is an AFA 80, and it's labeled as dark blue emblem. And so as I alluded to at the beginning of the video, there are different color variations for that emblem on his chest. And as you can see, he's got that little blue stripe and red stripe. And the most common one is the dark blue emblem. That's been my experience anyway. And AFA does denote the different colors of blue for these loose graded figures. And I'll show you the other example in a second. But this was a nice, clean example with a brand new case. Again, it was graded AFA 80, and this is a standard Hong Kong figure. This is the most common of all the different Star Destroyer commanders. Hong Kong dark blue emblem. And this one sold for $125 plus shipping. I think that's a pretty good deal for a near mint figure, already graded with a new case. Now we got an 80 plus figure. So this one just a half grade up in terms of score, but very, very clean. It did have a little scratch there on the utility belt on his left-hand side. Very, very faint, but it is there. But a nice clean example. And this one sold for $267 after accounting for shipping. So you can see that going from an 80 to an 80 plus, that's a pretty big jump in price. And of course, they're different auctions, different time periods, things like that. So you never know who you're bidding against. But this is on the higher end. I think that if you're going to spend $250, you can get an AFA 85 for that price. For an 80 plus, that seems a little high to me. But this one was a great deal. This is probably a little low, and this one's probably a little bit high in my estimation. Again, here's another example. This is an AFA 80 Star Destroyer Commander. Now this one is labeled light blue emblem. I find that the light blue emblem is a little bit more rare. You don't find those nearly as much. It's a very faint difference, but it's a much more vivid, brighter blue. And so when they say light blue, I think that's almost a misnomer. I would probably, if I were AFA, I'd probably label this bright blue emblem instead of light blue. But it's a lot brighter. I'll show you a comparison in a second, but look how bright that is. See if I can get a clearer, non-fuzzy shot. So that's a really bright blue versus this one where it's a little bit darker blue. It's a very faint difference. This is a good example. So you can see how dark blue that is right there. It's a very, very dark, rich blue color versus this one where it's a lot lighter in color. And let's see if we can get a better shot there. So it's a lot lighter in color. So it gives you an idea of what that is. So for the light blue AFA 80, that one went for $140 plus shipping. And I think that's a pretty good deal too. Now there can also be no emblem. That's a factory error. And this is one I almost bought. I watched it right when it went on the market. This was maybe a week or so ago, and it had the brand new UKG case. It was really nice. It was very tempting, and I put it on my watch list, and then I was like, well, maybe I should buy that. And by the time I went back on eBay to look for it, it had already sold, unfortunately. So, but this was a really cool one, factory error with no emblem. Now this is a no COO version, so this was probably made over in Europe somewhere. You know, would probably appear on Palatoy cards. There was no Palatoy Tried logo card back for the Death Sqad Commander, but probably a Palatoy card is my guess. It could have been any of the Palatoy cards. But that's a factory error. Really nice example. It was graded UKG 80%. So again, this is a no COO. And that one sold for best offer accepted at 130 pounds. I think I was offered 115 pounds for it. And if I had been on my money, I probably would have bought it. I'm regretting it now is what I'm trying to say. I wish I had bought this because I think it's a cool factory error. And as you can see, it was graded 80%, mainly because the paint around the silver on the buckle had a little bit of wear to it. Next up, we've got an 85 plus grade. And as you can see, the price went up. And this is a light blue one as well. So a little bit lighter color to that emblem, and a very, very high grade example. And this seller always tends to command really, really high prices. So, you know, we've talked about that in the past, but this one sold for $701. That's a really high number, well above what I would pay for it. But as we've talked about countless times, anytime you go from 85 to 85 plus or 90, the price multiple is like 2 or 3 sometimes. And in this case, it's probably like 3. I'd say 2.5. 2.5 is probably the multiple going from an 85 to an 85 plus. But it is the more desirable light blue emblem. Very difficult to find. And this was a gorgeous example with very crisp, clean photos, which tends to let buyers know exactly what they're getting. Now, I've bought from this seller before and been very happy. So I'm not trying to say anything too negative about him here, but that price does seem really, really high. Next up, I wanted to talk briefly about the Lili Ledy. So the Mexican Lili Ledy factory, made in Mexico, and this is a COO guide that is found on the Imperial Gunnery forums. So I'll put a link in the video description to this video so you can check out this information if you want to in more detail. But here are all the different kind of COOs for the Death Sqad Commander as outlined by W. Boba Fett, who runs Variant Villain. He's got a great website, and I encourage you guys to check it out. As you can see, there's very slight variations to the Hong Kong, mainly where the 1977 is located. There's also a Hong Kong where the 1977 is up higher, next to the GMFGI. There's also another Hong Kong with the scarred out, where the 1977 is scarred out. I would assume that's the PBP. And then there's also a no COO variation. As you can see here, there's two different no COO variations. One of them is a much cleaner kind of bump, and the other one is kind of a little bit rougher texture to it. And that probably also is another PBP figure, scarred out COO, with the 1977 in the lower calf area. Now the Kenner Lili Ledy is this one down here. This has the GMFGI stamp on there, but the Hong Kong is also scarred out. So this is like is considered a no COO. And this is one that's in my collection. And here's a side-by-side of the Kenner figure versus the Lili Ledy. As you can see, the Lili Ledy has a little bit different skin color. It's a little bit kind of peachish, more peach versus a paler face. And obviously the body type is a much darker gray, very, very dark gray. And so here's another angle. It's a very vivid difference. And there's the back, as well as a close-up of the face. As you can see, the paint applications for the eyebrows and the eyes are much deeper and darker color. And here's a nice close-up of the COO. So you've got the standard Hong Kong 1977 date stamp Kenner figure on your left, and then the Lili Ledy is on your right. Very similar to the PBP figure, except it's got a darker plastic color. So anyway, just some information there on the Lili Ledy, and I did manage to find a data point for a graded Lili Ledy figure, and here it is. This was graded 75 by AFA. You can note the wear around the emblem on his chest, as well as the wear to the silver on the belt, and that's what the driver was for the 75 grade. Now, he's known to come with the black Imperial blaster. The Lili Ledy and the PBP, to my knowledge, were also packed in with the bluish black Imperial blaster, and that's what this one has here. It looks like it's the bluish black blaster. So either they're interchangeable for the Lili Ledy and PBP, again, to my knowledge, but this is very clearly the blue-black blaster, and it was graded by AFA without an issue. So that one sold for $119.50 at auction on March 12th. I think that's a pretty good deal. It was an older case, and it was, at 75, but it's a nice foreign-made Lili Ledy figure, and I think that's a pretty good deal for the Death Sqad Commander. As a reference point, I bought my example from Facebook, and I paid complete with the Lili Ledy accessory about $100. Maybe it might have been $110, and it graded 80 with CAS, Collector Archive Services. So again, to get one already graded at a slightly lower grade, this is probably a pretty fair price, if not a good deal. Now, there is also a Spanish figure, a Spanish version of the Death Sqad Commander, and there are a number of different examples for the Spanish figure. COO number 3, which is this one here, is what is used for the Poch figure, Poch era. And when I say Poch, that's the Spanish figure, that's the earlier version. And there's two different Pochs. There's the standard boots, and there's also what's called the disco boots, where he's got a really thick heel on the back on the back of the figure. That one is more desirable. That's considered one of the few holy grails within the Spanish Poch figures, the early Spanish figures. But as you can see, this is the COO that the Poch figure shares with the Kenner figures. It's got the Hong Kong date stamp, which, as we've talked about in past videos, the Spanish Poch factory imported Hong Kong parts, assembled and painted them in Spain. So it's going to have a Hong Kong date stamp. And so it's this one right here without the COO, the 1977 stamp on the back of the calf. So that gives you what to look out for. It's just a very slight variation to it. And here's a nice example of the Kenner figure on your left, as well as the Poch on the right. The Poch, very similar to the Ledy figure, has a slightly darker shade Much thicker eyebrows and eyes, as you can see there. So that's something to look out for. It's just a very slight shade darker. It's not nearly as dark as the Lilly Ledy figure. The eyebrows and the eyes are very noticeable there, though. You can see how much darker the eyes are on that Poch figure. I didn't find any recent sales for the Poch, but I'm guessing you're probably talking for the regular Poch, not the disco boots. You're probably in the neighborhood of $300, would be my guess. For the disco boots, that can go for over $1,000. I've seen some UKG graded disco boot example Death Squad Commanders go for over $1,000. So very tough to find slight variation to the Poch figure. Now I wanted to cover a few mint on cards before we wrap up the video. This was an AFA 12-back A Death Squad Commander, and it was graded 70. So a fairly low grade, but it still sold for $965. And with any 12-back A, you're going to be paying big money for it. If you get into the 80, 85 range, you're going to be talking $1,500 to $2,000 pretty easily, depending on which one it is, the A, B, or C back. So just keep that in mind. But for an AFA 70, that gives you a rough price point for a 12-back A. And that was AFA 70 again, and again, it sold for $965. Here was a 12-back C that was graded AFA 80. 80, 85, 85 were the subscores. So, again, 12-back C, that sold for $1,025. That's about the going rate, I think, for a near mint 12-back C Death Squad Commander. I've seen them go as low as $900, and I've seen them go as high as about $1,200. So that gives you a rough range for the 12-back C. Here's a 20-back A, AFA 80. This was, I think, a really good deal, and I had it on my watch list, but it sold fairly quickly. The subs on this were 80, 85, 80, overall 80 grade. Really nice, clean example. One other thing I forgot to mention is that inside the blister, the Death Squad Commander is known. This is one of those figures that's known for getting that white mold and that white fuzz on his helmet, or sometimes on the gloves. I don't know why. But it doesn't matter if it's a 12-back, 20-back, or even Return of the Jedi cards. I've seen that white fuzz on the helmet and on the gloves especially for these Death Squad Commanders pretty commonly. And as I've talked about, if you put it under a UV lamp, supposedly it'll go away and kill that kind of white mold. But that's something to zoom in on the photos if you're looking for a mint on card Death Squad Commander, because that is a problem, a very common problem with that specific character. This one sold for $900. I thought that was a pretty good deal, though. Here was an ungraded one, a 20-back with the free Boba Fett offer. Nice, clean example, just some edge wear. It looked to be a clear blister. Very nice example, and I thought that was a pretty good deal. $394. Woof. I wish I had seen that one, because I think that was a steal of a deal for the Death Squad Commander. Here was a 21-back secret Star Wars action figure offer. And so this is a transition card where the first 12 figures were transitioning over to the Empire Strikes Back packaging. And that free secret Star Wars action figure is for the Bosk mail away. This was a nice example, AFA 80. I didn't look up what the final sales price was, but it was listed for $1,200, and the best offer was accepted for that one. So you can probably guess around $1,000 or so would be my guess. And that was a really nice example. It was punched, and it did have a price sticker, so I'm guessing it probably was about 20% off. And I should have looked it up, so I apologize for that. Finally, he did also come on the Return of the Jedi card, and they did switch over the name from the Death Squad Commander to the Star Destroyer Commander. I don't know exactly what card back it was. I think it was sometime during the Empire Strikes Back run. But this was a nice, clean example. It was punched, and it did have a price sticker, but it was a clear blister. And as we talk about, a lot of these U.S. Kenner Return of the Jedi card backs, if they have a clear blister, you're going to get pretty good money for it. It was graded AFA 75. This was the 65 back B. The subscores were 80, 75, 75. I don't know why it got the 75 subscore. It looked like the weapon was still attached in the blister. It might be kind of jostling loose ever so slightly, but that seemed like a pretty harsh figure score to get a 75 on that. But that still sold for $273. I think that's a pretty good deal. If it's an AFA 80 or above, kind of near mint and above, you're probably going to be $350 to $400 would be my guess for a clear blister. If it's a yellow blister, it's probably going to be south of that, probably in that $300 and under range for a nice Return of the Jedi with a yellow blister. Anyway, just wanted to give you a snapshot of some recent prices for the Star Destroyer Commander / Death Squad Commander, as well as cover some of the really nice foreign variants that are out there. It's a really cool figure, a nice addition to any collection. I hope that you enjoyed looking at it. If you're new to the channel, welcome. Please consider subscribing. And as always, thank you to my existing subscribers as well as my Patreon supporters, and I'll be back soon.